Hey, welcome back. Are you ready for the most unpopular top 3 range DPS of all time? Because this is our top 3 range DPS. Our favorite has nothing to do with meta, has anything to do with the current standings, and also, very importantly, historically.
Yeah, some of them have like close love in our heart over the years.
It's very personal. It's not a meta preference or anything like that. It's more of a, like, you know, gameplay, fantasy, reworks, talent, synergies, all of that.
So how about we start it, man?
No, we're not starting it. No.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? No, come on. I don't want to do a video.
It's gonna be the most unpopular thing. Or I'm gonna kick it off, okay?
Go for it.
Okay, so first one on the list, and by no surprise, because Flame is in the same boat. I think we had like 10 videos praising this spec, Fire Mage. Now for me, Fire Mage, this has been traditionally the range spec that I always fall on after I finish my melee journeys, because I always start off with a melee character, and then as an alt I go in for a range DPS if it's not a healer, obviously. And for me, it was always Fire Mage, all the way back into Cataclysm up until the present day. Fire Mage has been my go-to. I just, like, traditionally, I always loved the fantasy of a Fire Mage. I don't know, I just love that pyromaniac, that explosive, that burning everything all around.
For sure, yeah.
And I think, like, you know, sometimes they hit the mark with the spec in the past. I mean, sometimes they really missed it hard. You had the spec being meta in multiple patches in the past. It's not meta right now, but that's fine, because I think Fire Mage received one of the, if not the best reworks a spec has ever had in War Within, right?
When it comes to Fire Mage, because obviously it's also my main, but I have a different favorite spec. But it's actually better now while in its nerfed state than it was at the beginning of the season when it did more damage, because now it's actually have a balance in terms of builds. You actually have different builds that you can go for, and that's exactly what makes it so good, because in the past it was kind of like a one-trick pony. Just build up Ignite and spread it. Now they almost fixed Living Bomb. They fixed it in the way that it's the better AoE build, but it's not doing enough damage to compete with other specs, which is probably why you've never seen a Fire Mage in your group.
Exactly. The variety is important when talking about top 3 range DPS. It's not all about the giga numbers and always being in meta regardless of content or whatever. No, if you have build variety, that's one thing. If you have the fantasy to deliver on that, it's even better. And if the gameplay, mechanics, rotation flows the way it flows for Fire Mage. I mean, if you're a Fire Mage main for a long time, you are probably very happy, aside from like the damage component, which I don't think it's that bad. It's just other specs really outshine it in a lot of capacities.
Overall, it's not terrible, but you start to really see the difference. And I think what probably irks most people, me included, is that it got nerfed when it was average, and now it's below average. So weird. I mean, sure, I don't need to be meta of the spec, but it cannot feel good to feel like you're just beaten down because you just happen to be a Fire Mage.
Yeah, no, nobody understood why they nerfed it so hard. It's probably a reason because the Fire Mage was indeed, if you remember back in BFA, Shadowlands, it's always been on top in some capacity.
The thing is, because we talked about in a lot of our videos of a lot of specs, especially when we do tier lists, that they don't seem to be designed for dungeons. Fire Mage is designed for dungeons because of how the content scales and how Ignite scales. Fire Mage just has probably the most efficient damage profile in the game that you really want to solve all of the problems. And right now it's just not tuned that way, but that's why Fire Mage has always been meta top of the class.
So for sure. So this is like overall, this is the reason for me why one of my top range DPS would be Fire Mage, and Flames also, actually, because he plays it currently
in the raid. Because
in the raid,
you know what's funny, man? Because I don't know how many people watched this video that was watching us in the past. Whenever we made a fun tier list, and in terms of range, you always put Fire Mage in S tier, and I was always like, that's your thing.
This is true. This is a good argument, because if you look at our past tier list videos, I always ranked it.
It was your rank 1 DPS always, and for me it never was. I mean, it's Fire Mage. It felt gimmicky. I was more of an Arcane fanboy, and we'll get to that in a second. But I've been converted ever since the alpha rework.
Well, they did a tremendous job.
They did a really good job. It's a shame how they're tuning it, because it just needs more love. Because the devs who work on Fire Mage and Mage class in general need to kind of handle the other specs as well if they could. But in terms of my favorite spec, as much as I love Fire,
we get in there, boys. Get ready. You're not expecting this.
Oh my god, Arcane Mage. I have always loved Arcane way
Two
more than
specs
Fire.
of Mage in top 3
This
DPS.
is the variety that
range.
we've been talking about, everybody.
Very varied.
Also not a meta spec at the moment, also average of the pack, but in terms of history, this was my first mage ever. I always like to feel like the special underdog, because everybody was playing Frost back in vanilla when I was making my first mage, and I was like, I was the Arcane Missiles guy. Everybody was looking at me shooting Arcane Missiles like, what are you doing? That's not a Frostbolt. But I always liked the fantasy of Arcane. I got into the game because I was a lore geek. I was a fan of Medivh and Khadgar and all of that. Especially Khadgar was kind of cool. Seems to maybe be cool again. We'll see.
Yeah.
But what actually sold me as a main on Mage was Arcane, because okay, Fire was cool. I was like, oh, this is such a cool raid spec. But when I played Arcane and I noticed, oh my god, I get so many procs, so many damage windows. There's not a boring moment. It's no longer.
But this is in War Within.
Yeah, this is the War Within. This was in beta when we were testing the specs. That's when I was okay. This is my main. I'm sure I can be Fire and Raid, but I am doing most of the content we do is Mythic Plus. I'm definitely gonna be an Arcane Mage. The way that you build your rotation, and it's normally I really like variety in a spec. Arcane doesn't really have a lot of variety. It has some variety, 1 or 2 talent swaps, and they kind of changes your damage.
I mean, not as much as Fire.
No, not even close. Not even close. But the gameplay is so good that it trumps the lack of variety. And that hardly ever happens. It happens with only Arms Warrior and Balance Druid in the past, which now are in the gutter. But
we're not talking about those. No,
that goes a long way to show how good Arcane is in terms of it's just fun gameplay. Go into a game and you just have fun.
I'll give you that, but let me tell you why I was always afraid to get into Arcane.
Okay.
Because, you know, you get a spec, you go into the theory crafting section, alter time, whatever.
I think I know where you're going with this.
So I wanted to try Arcane because I went for Fire, right? But I said, okay, man, this looks pretty interesting. This is before War Within, right? Yeah. And I went to alter time and looked at the section where you did that opener, dude. I mean, what the hell, man?
We memed the shit out of.
Is that still a thing?
No.
God damn.
They actually modernized Arcane the same way that they did with Monk, where they took a lot of. I cannot really call it bloat because Arcane didn't have bloat.
It wasn't necessarily bloat, but it was so many conditions to make sure you deliver it right and on the same order. And when it was just, I was like, okay, I want in depth, but this is too goddamn.
This is you'll like Arcane way more now because it does have death, and it's a different kind of death. It's you have to combo a couple of abilities and you kind of swap around the buffs a little bit to try to maximize your biggest barrages ever. With I think Ether Vision is probably one of the best things that happened to Arcane in terms of a new player being able to actually play the spec, but also feel like, oh my god, and I can swap stacks with that stack and do that stack and press that stack. Is just nice. a really fun way to play. Not to mention that the hero talent is just. If you play Sun Fury, you just proc your Phoenix and you see they're just bombarding the target. Or if you play Spellslinger, it's the most visually rich.
I was going to say, like, when I saw you play on Spellslinger, looking at the footage and stuff and seeing all the arcane lights and explosions and all around, that's beautiful. That's the feedback you get. When you play that is just incredible.
Whenever the light show starts, your procs start as well, and you're like, oh shit, it's going. Not to mention that, dude, either it's what do you call it? Penis. No. Placebo. Or they actually added this audio effect in. When you press your touch of the Magi, there's a sound effect going in the background, like a rocket ship engine just revving up to launch, like, and it just reaches the culmination whenever your touch of the Magi slaps. And then, and the thing is, when you play and you're building up that ramp damage for that touch, it's kind of like execution sentence. So when you're building up all of that, storing all that damage to explode at one point, you're like, oh, it's going. You're getting that audio dopamine hit that's just fantastic. No other spec has this.
All right, let's move along to the third spec, which we both agree on. And it's, as usually with these videos, we kind of like, okay, what is the spec
that is... Try to find a common ground.
Yeah, find a common ground. And you will not expect this. This will be, this is totally not...
I forgot they even existed, man.
And it's... Shadow Priest. Now, before you come with pitchforks and
see the fire burning
and all of that, we see y'all. Listen, Shadow Priest
has been done wrong.
Has been indeed done wrong. But for this spec, like we did with the melees, with Red Paladin, and so on and so forth. So it's not in the best state right now. Okay, it's still interesting to play
and better than Fire.
Okay, but I think like Shadow Priest for both of us was always this love letter to a spec that is so different and so thematic with its like intersections with the void and all of the old gods. And I don't know a spec right now that can deliver better than what Loud Shadow does with its void component and actually
that's exactly
dipping into it.
Because we keep talking about the modern version of WoW and how they're doing some things that they don't really feel Warcrafty, but Shadow Priest is the future version of WoW. It's going into the way, because Shadow Priest used to just be Shadow, but for a couple of expansions it's been void as well,
journey.
Right? yeah, and with the void concept, it feels like, oh, all of these void enemies that we're fighting
with the old gods and
yeah,
stuff. I mean,
that's so
man.
thematic and that's so cool. And it had a couple of reworks going in from Dragonflight.
I would say about 20 reworks.
Yeah,
you have to think about it like even like from Shadowlands to like Dragonflight to wherever it went through hell up and down. And if you if you're like a Shadow Priest main and you're like up to date with like Public's videos and everything that's happening on Warcraft Priest and what, you know how many times this spec has been reworked and
it's just hard probably to find a place for it because it's kind of unique. It has the dot spread of Affliction Warlock kind of, but it has the insanity build up of, I don't know, maybe.
I love that the insanity. I love it because it's so in theme. Like if you go crazy because you're so
and you start hearing the whispers, you see the tentacles coming out, and this is not even talking about the hero talents. But I do have to say that Surge of Insanity gameplay is just really cool, and ever since they kind of swapped from it, the spec felt a little bit shit, but I'm glad everybody right now is playing Archon with Surge of Insanity, because building all that damage in that short little channel feels very old gaudy.
I mean, this is it, right? Yeah, like you muster in time all of that power and just everywhere. Now, sure, there's mind spike to be discussed. There's like a lot of issues with the spec. I still like I play mainly Discipline right now because we need healers, but I did play Shadow a couple of times just to like get the feel, and I still love it. Even though it has multiple problems, I still love it. I still like the flow of it. It's very gimmicky at some points. It's sometimes sluggish, but when you do get into the flow of things, it just always brings me back to that feeling of like love. Why would you love Shadow? Because yes, it does involve dotting up the place. It does involve like having some burst damage. It does involve being like one of the squishiest bastards out of there. And overall, like even though like today Shadow Priest isn't like in the best form it is, we still love it, and it's mostly due to like our past experiences with it and our past love for it, and we still have like really high hopes for the spec to like get where it's at. But we could not put it on this list because we both played it so much back in the past. It has to be here.
It has a lot of potential as well, because if you think of all of the different playstyles you could have with the old god capstones, and if you think of a spec like Fire Mage, if the devs that could handle that kind of spec variety and an expression of the class flavor and put it into all of the little capstones that Shadow Priest does, it would just explode. And coming midnight, bro, you know you're either going to be a Warrior of the Light or a Shadow Priest. There's no other classes exist, man.
I mean, I'm hoping for a much sooner
they kind of have to
for Shadow Priest, but Midnight should be the expansion where you would see the rise of a Shadow Priest, because come on, where
the original holders of Xalatath.
Yeah, but that's not important. What is important is what is your top 3 range DPS, and it has to be, you know, linked to the current game, but it also has to have some weight from history, right? From like how this spec, your favorite specs have been evolving, or how have you been playing or interacting with them through the expansions, right? So let us know in the comments which are your top 3 range DPS, and make sure to check the video that is on Flame's face right now, which talks about range DPS and rankings and stuff. So click it. Say click, Flame.
Click my face.
Bye.